融聚智慧，方能融创价值，融你我，融无限。江苏银行。
本节目由江苏银行冠名播出。
You are watching Whose Time? I'm Jyrki Katainen, Vice President of the European Commission.
2017年的5月14号到15号期间呢，“一带一路”国际合作高峰论坛在北京召开。通过这次论坛呢，让中国再一次的成为世界瞩目的焦点。共有29位外国元首、政府首脑和多位重要的国际组织负责人，以及来自130多个国家的大概1500多名参会嘉宾出席了峰会。这也是迄今为止中国举办的层级最高、规模最大的多边外交活动。 代表欧盟出席此次“一带一路”国际合作高峰论坛的欧盟委员会副主席卡泰宁一行颇受媒体的关注。出身芬兰的他呢，是一位资深的政客，曾经先后担任过芬兰民族联合党主席、欧洲人民党副主席、芬兰副总理兼财政部长等职务。2011年到2014年期间出任芬兰总理。2014年起担任欧盟委员会的副主席，主要负责就业、经济增长、投资和竞争力方面的事务。 作为此次出席论坛的欧盟代表团团长，探讨如何在“一带一路”框架下加强中国与欧洲国家在基建、投资、贸易等领域的合作，成为了卡泰宁肩负的重要使命。
So Vice President Kaitainen, it was very nice to have you on our program. So you were representing the European Union to participate in this important One Belt and One Road forum. So how do you see the progress and the organization of this forum?
First, we welcome very warmly Belt and Road Initiative, and we appreciate a lot that the Presidency has organized this event here in Beijing, because it includes lots of countries and international organizations to address the same challenges, but also to look at joint opportunities. EU and China has already established infrastructure platform, which identifies joint projects both in Europe and in China, which would improve connectivity. We have already identified 14 projects of this kind, 7 in Europe and 7 in China. So basically it means that EU and the European member states will start building better connections from Europe towards China through sea roads and railways and physical roads. So this is one concrete thing what we are already now doing. Also, Presidency has been talking that Belt and Road Initiative is not only about infrastructure, but it's also about regulatory cooperation in order to improve free trade and investment environment. And here again, we have ongoing process, which is about investment agreement between China and Europe. And this is very important because Chinese companies have full access to European market, whereas the European companies does not have the same rights in the Chinese market. And that's why we need investment agreement which would improve European investments to China. In other words, it would increase jobs, it would raise productivity and competitiveness of China. So this is another example of concrete cooperation.
So China now officially says Africa and Latin America are also included in this Belt and Road Initiative. We know that European countries as well as the US has already done a lot of development works in infrastructure building in these regions of the world. Is there any suggestions you will give based on your previous experiences and lessons for Chinese companies' effort in their initiative?
We need to use market economy as a tool for reducing poverty. China is a good example of the countries where market economy and foreign direct investments have helped to lift huge amount of people out of poverty. And the same can happen elsewhere too. So one concrete issue in which Chinese companies, Chinese authorities and the EU authorities and EU companies could work together in order to reduce poverty is to cooperate in African countries. EU is creating external investment plan, which means that we are about to create a new EU fund which is providing risk financing to companies investing in poorest part of Africa. So this is another example where China and Europe could work together in order to help the poorer part of the world to develop and of course help people to raise from the poverty.
2013年11月启动的洲欧投资协定谈判呢，是当前中国开展的最为重要的经贸谈判之一，也是欧盟委员会在2009年里斯本条约生效之后呢，代表成员国对外开展的第一个投资协定谈判，被视为当前中欧双方经贸关系中最为重要的议程之一。目标是在中国与欧盟成员国已经签署的投资保护协定的基础上，尽早达成一个更高水平的涵盖投资保护和市场准入的协定。“一带一路”峰会结束的当日呢，为期5天的第13轮中欧投资协定谈判在北京举行。对于此轮谈判中欧盟重点关注的互惠互利的原则，卡泰宁又会进行怎样的解读呢？
EU and China are negotiating a bilateral investment agreement, which is critical for market access into China for European countries. What area the EU side wants to push for more reciprocity between China and EU?
We are, of course, willing to have reciprocity as Chinese companies have full access to the European market. We would like to see same happening to the European companies in China. Of course, we know that situation is quite challenging here in China, but nevertheless, if and when China wants to get more foreign direct investments, and if and when China wants to get new jobs, high-quality jobs, and increase productivity and competitiveness, investment agreement is very important. So good partners who want to write a global rule book. In other terms, the partners, big trading blocs, EU and China, when they are willing to harness globalization, use globalization, but also try to limit the negative effects of it, we need reciprocity. We need a better investment agreement. So EU will propose and have already proposed to China that we should put turbo gear on in our negotiations and try to get the solution as soon as possible.
Do you see within this Belt and Road Summit any kind of signal on promoting reciprocity? Or is there any room for improvement, especially for European-China relationship?
Yes, there's certainly room for improvement. We do appreciate what President Xi has said, and we want to support his policy on this. President Xi has repeated over and over again that China wants to open up its market, it's in favor of free trade, which is a very important political message. And also, he has said that he wants to improve investment environment. So, EU supports President Xi's policy on this. We need multilateralism, we need freer and fairer trade and investment. So EU and China are negotiating on investment agreement at the moment, and we would like to speed up the process because Europe is completely open market for Chinese investment and Chinese companies to operate. EU Commission even financed Chinese companies' R&D activities in Europe. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, China is not as open for the European investments. And it's raising political problems at the moment. So in order to help President Xi's policies to be implemented, we want to speed up our investment agreement negotiations because it would be very good for Chinese people, for Chinese economy.
So there has recently been talk in Europe for potential screening of non-market oriented investment by Chinese companies into the Europe. But replying to that, you responded, it's quite difficult to imagine that the Commission would say to the owner of a company that you are not allowed to sell your company because you are too good. How would you elaborate on that?
Yeah, in Europe there is raising concerns towards foreign direct investments because China doesn't want to give same market access to the Europeans as what Europeans are giving to the Chinese companies. It has raised concerns, and I understand this. People are quite rightly asking if we are welcoming Chinese investments as we are, why China is not welcoming European investments. So it raises concerns and doubts. What is behind this? And there are people who would like to see more restrictive policies towards Chinese investments in Europe. But of course, because the European business model, the European way of living is based on global openness. And free trade and a free investment environment is part of European DNA. We don't want to restrict foreign direct investments more than it's necessary. But this is ongoing discussion in Europe, and that's why it's also very, very important to have a good result as soon as possible in our bilateral investment agreement negotiations, because it would help China to get foreign direct investments from Europe, and it would also address concerns which are raising in Europe, why China want to invest in Europe but doesn't allow Europeans to invest in China.
持续疲软的欧洲经济在今年呢有了回暖的迹象。经济数据显示，欧元区正在逐步的实现经济复苏。欧盟呢也在近期将欧元区2017年的经济增长预测从1.6%上调至了1.7%。那么在政治领域呢，3月的荷兰议会选举，首相吕特领导的传统右翼政党自由民主党战胜了极右翼的自由党，保持荷兰第一大党的地位。而5月举行的法国总统大选，中间派候选人马克龙的胜利也被视为是保卫欧洲一体化的重要胜利，在一定程度上暂时阻止了民粹主义的蔓延。谈及欧洲未来的政治经济发展的前景，卡泰宁的言语间充满了自信。
Economy is developing much better than during the last few years. Close to 2% at the moment. Of course, it should be higher, but anyway, it's much better than before. Also, investments are picking up. Still, we have to improve the level of investment, and unemployment is lower than any time after 2009. Employment is all-time high. So there are lots of positive signs. This is the result of structural reforms the EU member states have delivered during the last few years. Reforms always take some time, but now we can see them to bear fruit, and this is a positive sign. Also, in political front, the biggest wave of populism seems to be going away or melting, in a sense that people have got a feeling that populism sometimes can be quite dangerous and worrisome. So, Dutch election result, French presidential election result, they are the two good signs of more peaceful and thoughtful political mind which is evolving in Europe at the moment, and we all are very happy. Also, President Macron's victory showed that if you have very strong pro-integration, pro-European agenda and very sustainable globalization agenda and sustainable economic agenda, you can win the elections. So people are expecting responsibility from the political leaders, and those who are courageous enough, they can earn the support from the citizens.
Some say Europe is turning to a turning point, perhaps for nationalist movement in Europe.
The situation is clearly changing in Europe at the moment, because many people got worried about populism. Many ordinary citizens in various EU countries got scared of Brexit. Mm-hmm. They also got scared of US presidential elections.
That's right.
And rising populism and nationalism in some of the European countries. Mm-hmm. And many people seems to think now that, is it really necessary to destroy everything before getting food?
That's right.
So we have already good examples of changing attitude. For instance, in Netherlands, mm-hmm. Responsible political parties won, pro-European agenda won. In France, President Macron won because he had very pro-European responsible political agenda, also fiscally responsible political agenda. Mm-hmm. Also in Germany we are seeing very encouraging development where two major traditional responsible political parties are dominating the political debate and political scene. So in a few months' time, I expect Europe will concentrate on further deepening the integration, and our discussion will focus on how to reform mm-hmm. EU and Europe in order to be better in the future, instead of discussing about existential threats to the European integration. So situation looks both economically and politically more pride than it was a few months ago.
So globalization is under threat in the past year with situation in UK and US. On that, you recently said in a recent speech, you can and you must influence the future of globalization, and we cannot protect ourselves by protectionism. Is there anything EU can contribute in this, and is there any scope for China and EU to join hands on this?
EU Commission just published a communication on globalization, which takes a positive stand on globalization, and at the same time it identifies what we have to do in Europe in order to harness globalization, to smooth the effects of globalization at the same time when we are promoting global openness. So basically, the best thing to address all those justified concerns our citizens have is to improve business, trade and investment environment, meaning that we need reciprocity. Once we allow Chinese companies and we welcome Chinese investments to Europe, our citizens are sometimes asking why our companies are not having the same rights in China. And that's why, in order to create positive atmosphere towards global openness, we need reciprocity. This is one aspect. And then, of course, we have to, in Europe, we have to take care of people. We have to put more emphasis to education, for instance, in order to strengthen people's resilience. And we have to put more emphasis to social policy measures in order to share the fruits of globalization a more fair manner amongst our citizens. So there are lots of challenges ahead of us, but our basic orientation is that global openness is a positive thing. We just have to make sure that globalization is based on sustainable values and rules.
欧洲投资计划，也就是容克计划呢，是2014年由欧委会主席容克主导推出的一项大规模的投资计划，在3年内撬动总额约3150亿欧元的投资，以促进经济的发展，创造约130万个就业岗位，继而消除欧债危机对欧洲经济增长和就业的影响。中国呢，也在2016年初成为了欧洲复兴开发银行的成员，由此参与到容克计划当中，并且致力于将“一带一路”项目与容克计划相对接。未来呢，计划在中东欧、地中海东部和南部以及中亚等地区开展多种形式的项目投资与合作。
There is this Juncker plan I know you are in charge of. This leads to a question of critical investment in, say, R&D and infrastructure. There are some people thinking additionality of the current plan is not enough. How do you see this?
The investment plan for Europe is functioning very well at the moment. It has invested already 34 billion throughout Europe, and this is expected to trigger additional investments worth 184 billion euros. And this is the result of 1.5 years. So our aim is to invest to critical infrastructure, to research and innovations, and to small and medium-sized companies, so that it will trigger at least 300 billion in 3 years' time. And now European Commission has approved an extension of European investment plan, which will increase this 300 billion investment level in 3 years' time to 500 billion in 5 years' time. So there seems to be demand for risk financing in Europe. It additionally has been criticized by somebody, but once we have looked at EIB, European Investment Bank's investment policy, what are the projects to which they have investment through European Investment Plan, one must say that they have really created added value. They have managed to crowd in existing liquidity from the market instead of replacing it. Because investment plan doesn't want to compete with private money. Instead, we try to provide risk financing, which we are lacking into market terms, in order to crowd in private liquidity into the productive investment.
Scandinavian countries is viewed by many in the world as a top example, and you were the Prime Minister of Finland. How do you see continental Europe, or potentially China, can learn from the Scandinavian model? President Xi also visited Finland last December. before visiting US?
Yes, the Nordic countries model is a fascinating combination of our full openness, free market approach, and social protection.
That's right.
So, if looking at Sweden or Finland or Denmark, for instance, there the public sector's role varies between 40% per GDP to over 50% per GDP. So, public sector's role and social protection is very, very high.
That's right.
But at the same time, the three countries which I mentioned, they are fully open towards the world market. So the way to finance most generous in the world, most generous welfare societies is to be fully open in terms of trade. So globalization is the way to finance and bring money to the country, which then can be used for financing welfare society. So then you have to make sure that your labor market is competitive, your education is high quality, and your social systems are inclusive in a sense that it doesn't leave anybody behind. And finally, research and development and innovation policies are the utmost important. So free market, global openness, social protection, high quality education, they bring or they create an entity which is good for the people but good for the country too.
Here in China, many think this too high social protection as well as a lack of single market make it very hard for European countries to be competitive. Citing an example of in the top 10 IT companies worldwide, there's none from Europe. How do you see the competitiveness and investment improving in Europe?
So Europe is based on social market economy, which basically means that our market is fully open. So we allow Chinese businesses to operate freely in Europe. It's open for European companies, it's open for third country operators. And at the same time, we want to redistribute the wealth what free trade is generating to our citizens. So basically, social protection is part of our business model because we want to make sure that every single person have the same capability to participate to the society. So we don't want to leave anybody behind, and that's why our social model is very, very generous. At the same time, it's very costly.
That's right.
But that's why we have to focus on competitiveness. So European business model and European social market economy cannot be based on low costs only. Instead, it bases on high added value, and that's why innovation policies, open market, internal market, and innovative social policies and high quality education, they all are very important. It creates the competitiveness. So cost competitiveness is just part of it. So we need a more broader interpretation to the competitiveness.